The village of Probus celebrates the first minutes of a new millennium. It is a time to look to the future and to review the past. Over the centuries, the village has seen many changes, and none more so than in the last 100 years. Our ancient history is not entirely clear, but the village is believed to have been founded in the 5th century AD, when St. Probus, a Romano-Briton, travelled from Dorset along the coast and into the Foul River. From here, his journey may have taken him upstream, eventually coming ashore at the place we now know as Tresillian. Climbing the hill in search of land to build a church, he came to a flat area where there was a plentiful supply of water. Here he founded a Celtic Christian community. The church was later re-established by King Athelstan in about AD 930 and is mentioned in the Domesday Book. In 1120, the church was granted to the bishop and chapter of Exeter, subject to an annual payment of 2 gold pieces, and it later became a collegiate church. In 1242, the college was abolished and the revenues were taken for the benefit of the cathedral. The church was broken into at night in 1301. The clerk was murdered and a chalice and other ornaments were stolen. By the early years of the 16th century, work was underway to build a church tower, using stone from the quarry at Gwell Martin to the north of the village. The quarry was partly owned by one Nicholas Carmino, who, in a dispute with his relatives, prevented the villagers from taking the stone from the quarry. The dispute was taken before the Star Chamber in London in 1523 and was resolved in favour of the villagers. The building of the tower continued and was completed by the middle of the 16th century. Built of Cornish granite, the tower is not only one of the finest in Cornwall, but at 125 feet 10 inches, or 38.4 metres, it is also the highest, a landmark for miles around. In the 1800s, several restorations took place, and a close look at this early postcard shows the church without the 1904 extension to the south aisle that provides a vestry and organ chamber. The main fabric of the present church dates from the middle of the 15th century and was built in the Perpendicular Gothic style. The font was a recent addition in 1851. Above the south door is a James II coat of arms from 1685, whilst in the south aisle a memorial brass depicts John and Celia Wolfden of Golden, whose son-in-law was Nicholas Carmino. Behind the pulpit, this date may very well indicate the year when the screen was reconstructed, the inscription reading, "Jesus, hear us thy people." On the south wall, a hatchment shows the fleur-de-lis of the Hawkins family, and in the vestry is the magnificent marble memorial to Thomas Hawkins of Trewithen, who died in 1766. Thomas Hawkins persuaded his friends to provide inoculation against smallpox for their employees, and although many were saved by his actions, he himself died of the disease. Unseen, in the top of the altar table, is a stone slab marked with 5 crosses, from a medieval altar found buried under the floor during restoration of the church. The beautiful mosaic reredos depicting the crucifixion is a memorial to Richard William Barnes, vicar of Probus from 1849 to 1885, and, with the candelabrum and the painted roof of the chancel, dates from the late 19th century. On the north wall of the church, This staircase originally led to the rood loft, whilst the organ, previously situated in the Lady Chapel, was moved to its present site in the organ chamber in the early 1900s. Built by Heel and Company of Plymouth, it was dedicated on July the 6th, 1884. Outside the church grounds, on the wall of an adjacent cottage, is a shrine dating from the First World War, whilst just inside the church gates is the war memorial erected in the early 1920s, in the form of a lantern cross depicting St. Probus and St. Grace, St. George and the Crucifixion. It is here, every November, that all those who gave their lives at war for their country are remembered. Probus Parish Church is an important part of our village heritage. Hundreds of years ago, sacrifices were made and hardships suffered by the villagers of the day in order to build the church tower. What better way to celebrate a new millennium than by illuminating the church to welcome the 21st century? An application was made to the Millennium Commission, and with sponsorship from the public, Probus Parish Council and SWEB, the project was soon underway and being tested. The peaceful churchyard has been used for many years as a burial ground, and before the present church was built in the 15th century, a smaller chapel dedicated to St. George stood in the church grounds. On the east side of the church, the Hawkins tomb is guarded by 4 kneeling cavaliers. The old churchyard was closed to new burials when the new cemetery at Laddock Road was dedicated. Successive vicars of Probus lived here at the sanctuary, so named after the former right of protection from arrest, dating from 1301. Now a private residence, it has been renamed Glebe House, with the team rector's new bungalow still bearing the name The Sanctuary. A Methodist church was built in Chapel Street in 1825, during the reign of King George IV. The chapel has long since closed and is now a second-hand furniture shop, although the Sunday school next door, recently converted to residences, continued to be used as a chapel for some years. At the western end of the village, a Bible Christian chapel was established at the Green in 1881, but this has also closed and now houses a picture framing business. The earliest school in Probus was a grammar school, founded by a John Williams in 1688. But in the mid-19th century, a church school was built on a site in Tregony Road. Many will remember this as the parish hall, which was demolished in 1972 and replaced by 3 houses. Around 1900, Institute Villa on Wag Lane was a school with a house attached for the schoolmistress. Through a spy hole in the house, she could look down on the children in the schoolroom. The building later became the Probus Reading Room and then an upholstery workshop. Now a private residence, these slates and inkwells still survive from the school days. Also around that time, Laburnum Villa in the Square was a school kept by the Pascoe sisters, Bessie, Grace, Jane and Annie. But undoubtedly the most widely known school was Probus School. Built in 1834 as a workhouse, the school was established in its place in 1853. Primarily a boarding school, boys also attended on a day basis. During Captain Scott's expedition to the South Pole in 1911, one of the sledges was named Probus School. In 1873, Henry Edwin Handsomebody was appointed as one of the masters, at which time there were 28 boys. In 1875, he became headmaster and remained so until 1930. The school had its own open-air bathing pool, fed by a river near the old Probus Halt railway station, and the original door arch from the Hawkins laboratory can be seen in the museum in Truro. The school closed in 1960, but the 1834 date stone from the original building survives to this day in the forecourt wall of Probus School filling station, whilst the school and one of the principals, F. Bernard Luman, are still commemorated nearby. In 1871, a Methodist school opened, then moved to new premises in Chapel Street exactly 30 years later. The school catered for pupils of all ages, and no doubt many older residents will recognise themselves and their friends in these old class photographs. In 1961, the older pupils were transferred to the new school at Tregony, and since then it has been a primary school for the youngsters of the village. An important stopping place on the main road through Cornwall, the mail coach from Falmouth to Plymouth passed through the village. But horse-drawn carts gradually gave way to motorised vehicles. Today, however, the village is quieter, with the opening of the new bypass. But what were things like in the early 1900s? As well as local tradesmen with their delivery carts, a horse-drawn bus service stopped near the square to pick up passengers. One of the earliest services was introduced by Mr. Lidgy of Tregony. Eventually, the first motor cars arrived, along with delivery vans, such as these belonging to Golden Vale Dairy and Rouse, the corn merchants at Gein Mill, where milling for animal feed continued until the 1960s. The roads were very different in those days. How narrow the old Truro road seems. The AA box has long gone, and a modern juggernaut would hardly squeeze round this corner near Gein Mill. But in the early 1960s, the main road was widened. Junctions were refashioned, a lay-by for traffic was introduced, the road was straightened, the old AA box disappeared, and whilst the trees and bushes at the roadside had yet to grow to the size we see today, the main road to Truro gradually took shape. Probus also had its own railway station, Probus Halt, near the railway bridge at the bottom of Truck Hill. In the 1960s, however, under the Beeching Plan, the station was demolished. And today we can only watch as the trains speed past on their way through Cornwall. Over the years, increased road traffic, especially in the summer months, brought chaos to Fore Street. And in 1995, the long-awaited work began on building the Probus bypass. Roads were closed and cones appeared overnight. Sweeping to the south of the village, tarmac and concrete wound its way over 2 miles of countryside. Machines moved in, and concrete was delivered for men to add the finishing touches. By the following year, the bypass had opened, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Today, as traffic speeds to and fro along the bypass, we can only wonder how we managed to go about our daily lives when the only route for all these vehicles was through the very centre of the village. And rough roads have given way to tarmac and white lines. But, as in years gone by, there is still time to stop and talk to friends, although you would be ill-advised to stand in the middle of the road today. Many years ago there was a post office next to the chip shop, but only the chip shop now survives. The horse-drawn water cart has long since been replaced by mains water piped directly into every home. And instead of walking to the shops, we can now drive there in a matter of minutes. Thatched roofs have disappeared, and over the years the butcher's shop has been transformed into a newsagent's. The 2 white cottages of Coal Pen no longer have steps up to the door. Today a ramp provides easier access. The Jubilee lamp commemorates Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897, but successive layers of tarmac have gradually taken over the base. As these early images show, Fore Street had its share of traffic and pedestrians, although there was still time and space to pose in the middle of the street for a photographer. The Lamplighter restaurant was originally known as Gold Martin Cafe, and in earlier days an extension to the side served as a stable. On the opposite side of the road, some of the cottages have changed almost beyond recognition over the years, while the Hawkins Arms, dating from the 18th century, was once owned by the Hawkins family of Trewithen, whose coat of arms is still displayed. The entrance to Buckingham Farm once stood where Lemon Tree's restaurant is today, with the village hall and the Gwellan Nans estate built on the former farmland. Over the years, the cottages along Fore Street have changed with the style of each generation. What was once a rough highway now has curbed pavement, and in more recent years, efforts have been made to slow the speed of traffic along the main street. There were no such problems in the days of the horse-drawn cart, and the village policeman needed no breathalyzer or speed trap to go about his duties then. The mail would be collected from Grampound Road station by the postman in his donkey cart, and what was once a motorbike shop is now used by a local painter and decorator. Near to the old Probus School, Onway House was built in 1856 and was probably used by the masters at the school. These cottages, opposite the petrol station, have recently been modernised, and in the past a nearby dwelling served as a tuck shop for the boys from the school. At the west end of the village, the area around the Green is one of the oldest parts of Probus, and in addition to the chapel there was once a blacksmith's forge and a village pump. During the Second World War, the chapel was used as an emergency food store, and in later years as a chapel of rest by the local undertaker. Retracing our steps up Fore Street, we come to the junction with Treviglas Lane, on the corner of which stood the Manse, the home of the Methodist minister. Treviglas Lane was widened to provide access to the housing built there during the 1960s and 70s. In the 1950s, a petrol garage and grocer's shop stood next to the present post office. The stone archway, which now forms the entrance porch to the post office, was once the entrance to a house at the rear. There was also a sawmill and, later, a car sales area, but these have since been replaced by houses. Prime's shop was well known for its bread, cakes and pastries, and for the Probus Feast teas. The shop later became a grocer's and is now a farm shop. For some time the Jubilee lamp was without its globe, and road signs hung from the arms. Restored in 1979, and despite a subsequent argument with a bus, the lamp remains a symbol of the village. On the corner of Chapel Street and St Austell Road, Fugler's General Shop will be remembered by the older generation as a place where you could buy almost everything. It is now a private house. On the opposite side of the road, the blacksmith's forge closed down many years ago. This picture, taken in the early 1900s, shows the blacksmith with his helpers, along with some boys and young men of the village. Looking up the road towards St Austell, the houses do not seem to have changed greatly over the years, although the toll house is gone, of course. There has been an abattoir here for many years, but over time the cluster of small buildings with little vans has given way to a large modern factory and refrigerated lorries. Since 1972, one of the village's most popular attractions has been Probus Gardens. Previously owned by the County Council, the gardens are well known not only in Cornwall but countrywide, and are now run as a private enterprise with sponsorship from South West Water. Advice is freely given on all aspects of gardening, with courses on horticulture and arts and crafts. cottages of Chapel Street still border the back road to Laddock, as they did many years ago. But the unmade road has disappeared, and today the street is crowded with cars. There has been some modernisation and new building, but at the beginning of the 20th century, the street and houses would have been decorated for Probus feast day, and local people would parade in their finery, chatting with their neighbours. The big oven of Prime's bakehouse could take 300 loaves at a time, and although the bakehouse closed a long time ago, the water pump remains as a timely reminder of how Chapel Street must have appeared to past generations. These cottages on the corner of Chapel Street were once a beer house, Cornish Mount, where the landlord brewed his own ale. The cottages of High Street present a peaceful corner of the village where summer flowers and blue skies remind us of a lifelong past. The road to Tregony, once the scene for villagers posing for photographs, is now the setting for cars to pose to the camera. This fine stone building, Spry's House, was once a farmhouse belonging to the Trewithen estate. The farm itself occupied the land on which the Carnview estate now stands. In 1936, the King George V playing field was given to the village by Squire Johnston of Trewithen. Cricket matches were once played, as well as football. And in addition to the pavilion, which opened in 1938, there is a children's play area and a bowling green. From the square, Wag Lane winds down by the church, and, thankfully, this 1950s snow scene has rarely been repeated. A pleasant walk will lead you past one of the last remaining village pumps, and by the only thatched cottage left in the village today. Records show that in 1664, Probus was a village of some 88 houses, and that by 1939 there were 140 dwellings. By the early 1960s, around 1,250 people lived in the village, and today there are about 875 houses in Probus parish, providing homes for more than 2,000 people. In the 1940s, a housing estate was built at Park and Gear Veen by the local council. The rapid expansion of the village started in the 1960s, when houses were built in Ridgeway, Treviglas Lane, and on the site of the old Probus School, followed in the 1970s by Treviglas Rise. In the last 25 years, 100 houses have been built in Gwellan Nans and Hicks Close, and 200 on the Carnview estate near Probus Gardens at the eastern end of the village. Most recently, there has been the building of Cullen View near the post office, as well as some individual house developments. The new Bosnaworth estate of 36 houses is taking shape between the playing field and Carnview Road. Carnivals were held regularly in the village, and these images from the 1950s will, no doubt, bring back memories for older villagers. Throughout the years, Probus had a strong tradition of feast days and horse fairs, but sadly, along with the carnival, these have all now passed into history. Nevertheless, carnival time was always a big event in the calendar, an occasion for dressing up and taking part in the celebrations. Whilst the ladies tried their luck in the beauty contest, the children dressed up in fancy outfits, and everyone waited patiently for the big moment when the Carnival Queen took centre stage. And at the end of the day, there were always the cups and prizes to be awarded. A fundraising walk in the 1960s was recorded for posterity on the latest cine camera. No high-tech walking boots, rucksacks or maps needed here. Just a good old desire to have fun and enjoy a walk with friends. Today's Sporting 99 week was no exception. In addition to a treasure hunt, board games evening and other events, a cycle race took place around the village involving a long, hard climb up the bypass. And the final stretch back to the playing field. On the Saturday, the Sports Day races got underway and were greatly enjoyed by all those who took part, and by those who merely sat and watched.
And make sure you give your names.
As well as the racing events, there were lots of other attractions to keep people entertained. There were sideshows and stalls with plenty of bargains.
Keep going. Keep going. There they come, there they come.
If you wanted to, you could even have your face painted.
So it's going to be close. Go on. Oh, well run, lads. Tall.
There were dads galloping round, all trying to beat each other. Although some couldn't really make head nor tail of it all. And if the pace became too hectic, well, why not have a quiet sleep and let everyone else do all the hard work? In 1978, a new village hall was opened, providing a venue for many of the village clubs and organisations to meet.
5 days or whatever it is through the month.
It's a very good report. Yeah. There are a couple of free ones here, so I don't know.
Oh, I'm all this time. I thought you wouldn't be.
Photographs taken at the Eclipse Farm.
Oh,
Nice.
you see the pattern? That's his tail. That's not his stick.
And they've got two characters on the back of the chair.
She's heavier than normal.
I do.
You don't think that is right? It's all. Is she gone?
Well, she didn't come back to the third. They come on Thursday, I think.
What do you want me to do? Just sit still?
Cheesy cracker bread. What have I bid?
It's on a picture.
5 and 7, 57. 4 and 6, 46. 8 and 2, 82. 1 and 9, 19. 1, number 10. 3 and 9, 39. 6 and 2, 62. 2 and 7, 27.
Somebody else. Do we know where Connie is? Oh, I broke my finger. Who put it there? What was that? We can make this put another one in. I can't crack it.
The 8 bells of Probus Church form one of the finest peals in Cornwall. 6 bells date from the 18th century, and 2 smaller ones were added in 1938. Meanwhile, on the outside of the church, there have been recent charity abseils down the tower, this one taking place in June 1999. You certainly need a head for heights and total faith in whoever is holding the other end of the rope. For years, the annual pantomime has been a popular event in the Probus calendar. Many of those taking part in these pantomimes of the late 1950s now have children and grandchildren in the recent productions, which were revived in 1992. From treading the boards to making the costumes, from painting the scenery to selling the programmes, today's Probus parish players put all their time and energy into creating a show which will be enjoyed by all.
It's a sliver that's too small. It's a larger size.
I'm afraid it's this one or nothing.
Wait, I'll take the sock off. Can you help me, Mumsy? Take my sock off. I think there's something fishy going on here. No. I thought it much.
New Year's Eve 1999, and we return to the church at the heart of our village, where village history began. On this special night, a special service to welcome the new millennium, when the church will be floodlit, not only in commemoration of the past, but to express hope for the future of a community.
It's very simple. Let there be respect for the earth, peace for its people, love in our lives, delight in the good, forgiveness for past wrongs, and from now on, a new start.
As midnight approaches, the people of Probus who are in the church for the service join those already in the square. It seems as if the whole village has turned out for the occasion, and the bishop is here to perform the ceremony of switching on the floodlights. A fitting way for the village to mark the start of the 21st century.
So we've got about 40 seconds to go to midnight. And some of you are already looking 100 years older. So let's begin the countdown. 30 seconds to go. 90. No. Ready, steady, go! Let's go. No midnight. It's midnight